I've always wondered how many hours a superintendent works every day versus having his personal time. I know that was kind of an issue for you.
Wow.
Probably leaving, right?
You know what? You're the first person to ask me that. So typically, I would get in here about 9 o'clock in the morning, somewhere around there, and usually leave about 9:30, 10 o'clock at night.
Wow.
Yep. And that was every day during the week, almost every day.
So you're working 12-hour days at least.
Yep. And that's a haul.
Yeah.
It is. So your family really sacrifices a lot when you take on a job like this. Now, you couple in, if something happens overnight, they're constantly calling, waking me back up at night. But that's just, you accept that because that's part of the job.
So you have your phone next to you and it's always ringing.
Always ringing, yep.
Would you get notified every time there's a homicide or?
So no, but anytime there were multiple victims shot, I would get notified, anything newsworthy or if it's a police involved incident. Mm-hmm. And that happens a lot, and so it was a constant thing. And I had to adjust the way I did things so I wasn't constantly waking up my family,
You gonna throw away your cell phone there? I'm just kidding. All right. So you didn't ask for this job.
Right.
And in my words, you got a booby prize. I mean, murders were skyrocketing the first year in your job. Now violent crime is going down. How much credit should you take for the city apparently going in the right direction?
So I think we take credit for that. When I came in 2016, everything was a mess. The city was just one incident away from just burning down. The morale was shaken. Nobody wanted to be the next Laquan McDonald video, of course. The tension between the community and the police department was horrible. So I'll tell you this, the first 6 to 8 months of 2016, every single day, including the weekends, I was either with the community in some form or with the rank and file. But that's what it took to bring everything back together. And as a result of that, I think one of the best things that I did in retrospect was about that first month I was in office, probably in the first 2 weeks, our main critics, the black activists who just hated CPD, I brought all of them up here one by one and let them voice their concerns to me. And today, what I'm most proud of, now they're partnering with the police to see how we can make this a better city. And that speaks volumes. And all they wanted to do was be heard. Mm-hmm. So we are definitely going in the right direction because you remember 2016 was horrible. The experts predicted 2017 would be worse. We not only blunted it, but we brought it down 23% in 1 year, 15% the next year. This year we're at 11% declines. That's a result of growing the department by 1,000 officers, investing in the police officers with all the technology. But the third piece that can't be understated is bringing the community back together with their police department. You take the case of that 7-year-old little girl that was shot on Halloween. I think had we not done the things that we've done, we wouldn't have got all the tips from the immigrant community that we got. That's a community that have been bombarded by folks on the East Coast. They don't trust people, but they trusted us enough to give us those tips, and that's what allowed us to get those guys.
That was a big thing.
A huge thing.
Moving on, because we don't have a lot of time. What was the worst day on your job? Can you remember what that day was over the last 3 years?
As superintendent?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Sorry.
When the chief of patrol came to tell me Paul Bauer had got shot in the head. That was tough.
It was a senseless thing.
It was. When Samuel Jimenez was killed at Mercy Hospital, I still remember where I was and trying to get back here. And then probably the most shocking one was Marmaleo and Gary getting struck by that train. So, Man, those were tough days.
You knew probably coming into this job you're going to have those tough days.
I did.
Did that make you not want to do it?
In full disclosure, I told Rami Emanuel, I said, you know, that's one of my hesitations, because you know that's a part of this profession, and you know it's a possibility that's gonna happen. And I got to tell you, Frank, man, having to meet those spouses in the emergency room is no fun. But that was one of my hesitations. I'll be honest with you and tell you that was one of my hesitations.
I can imagine. Do you have any, can you say if there's any difference in working for Lori Lightfoot and Rom?
They're certainly different people. Both of them have partnered with me in the crime fight. Of course, Lori Lightfoot is now she's still in the beginning of her tenure, but both of them absolutely hold the police department accountable, you know, and keep us on task in terms of what they expect for us to do. But they also, both of them, have been good in terms of partnering with me to make sure we have the resources that we need. So, of course, I spend a lot more time with Rami Emanuel, and I will say that when I agreed to take this job, there were certain things that we agreed was going to happen, and I have to say this, he was a man of his word. There was never a time that I went to him asking for something for the police department and he didn't deliver. That he was a man of his word, and I will forever be grateful for him for that. Mayor Lightfoot, she's continued that. You know, she's constantly asking, what do you need? And she really focuses on the needs of patrol. You know, so both of them have been good to me in terms of getting me the resources and partnering with me in this crime fight.
As an African-American superintendent, how pervasive do you believe racism is among officers today?
I don't think it's where it was before. I do believe racism still exists. You know, I can't train that out of people, but what I can do is make them more professional in the way that they respond to people. You know, it would be disingenuous for me as an African American to say something like, I don't believe there's racism, because there is. There's racism in this country. You know, but you'll never fix that unless you acknowledge it. So I think our officers are doing a much better job of being the professional police department that we want them to be. And with that, we're giving them the training necessary. Because when you put people in different cultures and they have no idea of that culture, they tend to resist it. So I think we've done a better job of letting them know what they're going to experience once they hit the street.
So good superintendents, I'll just name a few, Klein, I'll say McCarthy, both went out, some would say, because of things that tainted their career at the very end. Like, for example, Phil Klein had to take the fall for a body. McCarthy with Laquan McDonald. Here you are with this thing with the Inspector General. Are you sad that your career is ending with this cloud at the very end of your career?
I mean, I guess you could call it a cloud. We'll let that investigation, you know, bear out what it bears out. But what I will say to you is this, Frank. Despite what people may think, I'm human first, you know. But I think that my 31 years of service to this city, and certainly the accomplishments we've made as a department and as a city in this last almost 4 years of me being superintendent, speaks for itself.
Will there be anything on that video that the public will look at and say they'll be surprised by?
I don't think so. I think what's been out there at this point has been widely talked about. So, you know, that's about all I'll say about that.
I want to go to a couple other things, but first, Jussie Smollett. Have you ever gotten a what you would consider a credible explanation for why the state's attorney did what they did in the Smollett case?
No, well, you know, they made their decision, and that is what it is. I don't always agree. Me and State's Attorney Kim Foxx have had a wonderful relationship. We don't always agree, and we didn't agree on that particular thing. You know, I was okay with, because let's face it, at the end of the day, it was a Class 4 felony. There wasn't going to be any prison time or anything associated with that. But an apology from him would have been nice.
And I'm sure your officers, well, I know your officers feel there was something that smelled about that situation. I mean, what do you tell the rank and file about that?
Yeah, I mean, we've used diversion prosecution before, so that's nothing new. But I just think that the way it happened and was executed, I think that's what officers have a rub with. But but like I said, Kim and I talk all the time. We didn't agree on that, and then it's time to move on.
Mm-hmm. You spent a lot of time in your career trying to get gun laws passed, and are you optimistic or pessimistic we'll see policy that'll deter criminals from getting guns and possessing them? I mean, it had to be frustrating.
It is very frustrating. I think that if ever there was a time that I thought our federal government would move on it, it was the Parkland shooting. When I didn't see them move, I just have no confidence that they're going to do the right thing. We're not trying to take guns away from people that can legally have them. We're trying to stop the people that shouldn't have them from having them. And I'm just frustrated because all we want to do is make these cities and our country safe. That's it. But until our legislators understand that, we're going to keep spinning our wheels. The fact that we don't have universal background checks, that's ridiculous. You shouldn't be able to go from Illinois to Indiana, buy a satchel full of guns, and come back in our city. You just should not be able to do that. We should also have documented transfer of weapons. Mm-hmm. When you sell your car, what's the first thing you have to do? You got to go get the proper documentation. These handguns can take somebody's life in a split second. You don't think we should document where they're moving around? The answer is we should. And that's not a heavy lift. So hopefully, I'm not optimistic that it will happen, but I'm hopeful that it will happen.
I'll sneak one more question in. Why do you think the far right and then Donald Trump have beat up Chicago about crime? We had worse crime before these guys came in.
Oh,
do you have a political theory about why this is happening?
Yeah, and first of all, when it comes to violent crime, Chicago is not even close to the top. We just get so much press because we're so big and we get compared to New York and LA. So the narrative that we're the most violent city in this country is just not factual. Facts do matter to some people. But I think that all that rhetoric started with certain folks not particularly liking former President Obama and former Mayor Rahm Emanuel. I think that's where all that comes from. So if people want to dwell in that nonsense, then so be it.
It was pretty amazing to me because I listened to all sorts of people, or you would never hear Rush Limbaugh or Hannity talk about Chicago until Obama.
That's exactly right. So I mean, you have to call it like it is. It never happened before. So I do think there's a parallel with that.
Was that a major problem in your superintendency, that there was this national narrative that Chicago is a dangerous place?
It was a frustration. It was a frustration because we keep getting painted with that brush that's simply not true. And in terms of Washington, they withheld a lot of funding from us, millions of dollars, because of that attitude. And if you really truly want to help combat violent crime, then give us that money so we can get the resources that we need.
Wow, what was that? What was the money?
Like the burn grant, You're talking about $10, $11, $12 million a year that they withheld from us because we're a sanctuary city.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, yeah. And that's just what you're doing. You're holding the police hostage because of political ideologies. You can think whatever you want to think on both sides of that equation. I'm okay with that. But at the end of the day, we're trying to keep this country safe. So don't punish the police who are the guardians of these communities because of your political beliefs. Mm-hmm. So.
Well, good luck to you.
Thanks, Frank.
Thank you very
for
much.
Always being a gentleman.